Well, 8:30 sharp, my house lifted up off the foundation and floated into the neighbor's house. The house on the upper side of mine come in, floated in against my house, knocked my house off of its foundation. They both went into my neighbor's house. And the water, I could not see over the top of that when it first come in sight. The only warning we had was just a neighbor woman had spotted it and just pulled in front of our house and hollered, "Run, the dam has broke." And then you could hear the roar of it, and you could see it. I saw my neighbors' houses leave. I watched them crumble. I seen trees, logs, cars, slate, slush, you name it, and it was in that. After we got through to safety and all and turned around, I saw 5 houses floating down the creek, and you could walk on from one to the other. One house particularly, I don't know who they were. At the time I didn't know who they were, but I found out later they was the Ballard and Janice Lou Carter family. There was 5 of them in the house.
They never got out?
No, they're all gone.
My neighbors come and woke me and my wife up on Saturday morning. I'd got up to fix fires up and was watching television with my kids, and the power went off. And they come and knocking on the door and hollering and said the dam broke up. Well, we'd been expecting maybe to hear this word because we'd stayed up till 2 o'clock that night watching for the flood because the waters was high and we was afraid we might get washed out then. But it still hadn't dawned on us until we looked around and we'd seen our neighbors running around like crazy trying to warn everybody that the dam had broke. Well, we got ready and I run out on the creek bank with a bunch more of the men there. There's about 5 of us. We'd heard that there was a woman and a baby floating down the creek on part of a house. Well, we stayed out there until there was no longer any need for a stand there because the creek was getting up high, and they all took off and left me there by myself there. My wife had got the kids in the car and started up and was waiting on me. And it's just as I happened to look up out the side of my eye, I saw it coming. And I took off running for the car, and I warned the people down the creek as I went that the water was coming. They wouldn't believe me, and I told them, I said, well, look out there, you can see the houses coming down the creek. But still, they didn't believe. There was just a few took off. Well, we went on down the road then, warning more as we come along to them. And we got our kids to safety, and then we took off back to where we could see what was happening as damage was coming down the creek. We seen about 14 houses destroyed as they hit the bridge, and about 5 cars, and there was many lives lost. But this is the most tragic thing I've ever seen in my life. I'm sorry that God let me live to see it.
In Logan County, where coal is the king, where the people work hard for most everything. On Buffalo Creek it was cloudy and gray, and the people were rising to meet a new day. The bacon was sizzling and the coffee was poured, but the dam up the holler couldn't hold any more. And the water raged down, smashed town after town. Homes dashed to pieces and whole families was drowned.
In about 1960 to 1964, there were various efforts made throughout the United States, and including Appalachian coal area, to clean up the streams as an environmental improvement act. And the so-called coal waste dam, as personified by the Buffalo Creek Dam, was invented as a tool for filtering the solid waste from the coal mining and processing activities from the stream water, so that the water that was contaminated with the coal waste would come out clean. It was a field invention. Somebody pushed some waste across the stream. The water on the upstream side was black and the water on the downstream side was clear. And based on this success, bigger and better filtration dams were built, and they were successful for a number of years. And eventually, this one was big enough to fail in a hazardous manner.
The Interior Department investigated the fatalities, or investigated the disaster, starting really immediately afterward, within a few hours. And 3 separate reports were produced. One which was out of the Bureau of Mines and was handled pretty much by the standard Bureau of Mines people who are not particularly skilled in dam construction, but they do investigate all mine-related fatal accidents. A second was produced by a man named Fred Walker, who had been a head of the earth dam section at the Bureau of Reclamation, and was very much an expert in the kind of dam that was used at Buffalo Creek. In other words, a loose, non-impervious kind of dam. And then there was a third investigation by the Geological Survey, also headed up by experts in this kind of dam construction. Their reports are lengthy, but they all find basically the same thing, which is that the dam simply was not built to impound successfully large quantities of water, certainly nothing like 120 or 130 million gallons, which is what was backed up behind there on the morning of February 26th. All of the reports express in bureaucratic terms the real shock that the investigators felt personally as they slowly became aware of just how totally inadequate the dam was and how inevitable it was that it was going to break.
Looking upstream from Buffalo Creek at dams 1, 2, and 3 and the pools of water backed up behind them on February the 1st, 1972. February 26 at 6 a.m., the water behind Dam 3 is rising. Cracks in the dam indicate early signs of distress and weakness. 2 hours later, at 8 a.m., Dam 3 begins to fail, causing overtopping of Dams 2 and 1. Sludge from Pool 2 is thrown to the left side of Dam 2. 8:02 a.m. Progressive failure continues to destroy the remaining sections of Dam 3. The initial flood water subsides, exposing the break in Dam 2. 8:03 a.m. Dam 3 collapses completely, which releases the major flood wave. 8:04 a.m. The flood wave overtops Dam 2 and destroys Dam 1. 8:05 a.m. The floodwaters break through the refuse pile and destroy the first town on Buffalo Creek. The remnants of the dams after the flood.
Pittston knew 24 hours in advance that the water was rising ominously and steadily. The rain was continuing. There was no probability of a let-up. There were no forecasts that it was going to that the situation was going to improve. Jack Kent, the head of strip mining for Pittston in that area, was up at the dam on an hourly or more than hourly basis. He had a measuring stick in the dam. He could see the water rising. He called Steve Dasovich, who was the general boss for Pittston in the area, and expressed his concern that it was going to go. And then, of course, as I think the rest is history, but Dasovich, for reasons really known only to himself, decided to reassure people downstream that nothing was going to happen. and left the area and was on his way out of the valley when the dam did go.
We just kept climbing up the mountain and everything, and I looked back, I heard someone screaming for help, and I looked back and there was the yellow house going down the water, and I could see through the window. The house wasn't torn apart. I could just, but I could see through the window. People were in the house, and they were trying to get out of it. And it just broke my heart because I knew that there wasn't anything we could do. We were trying to save our own lives. Right now, to me, after seeing it and everything, it still seems unreal. It just doesn't seem like it happened.
The way I actually felt about the dam, the confidence that I had in the officials of the company, I just couldn't figure out why they didn't send us a warning. I couldn't. It's still a mystery to me. That's why I'm hurt. I saw a deputy sheriff go down the road at, maybe 25 miles an hour at ease in his cruiser because he had been turned back and assured that everything was under control. He had nothing to fear either. But a few minutes after, all hell broke loose.
At the time of the Buffalo Creek disaster, Pittston was the fourth largest American coal company and the largest independent coal company, and probably was unique in the industry in having cornered a very substantial part of the metallurgical coal reserves in the United States. And basically what that means is that they were able to determine the price of coal with much more on their own ability rather than waiting to see what the market would do, because when you're selling coal to utilities, you're selling it in competition with oil. When you're selling coal to a steel company, you're not selling in competition with any other fuel because they have to buy coal. It's the cream of the crop, so to speak. So that you could fairly say that it was a company which was in a unique financial situation, and by no stretch of the imagination could use the excuse that you often hear in the coal industry about how times were tough and we would have done it better if we could have. This was a company that could have done it as well as it needed to be done. From the standpoint of safety, the company was typical to a considerable extent and slightly worse than average. In 1971, there had been 9 fatal accidents in Pittston mines, and there'd been, according to the Bureau of Mine Statistics, 743 serious, disabling, non-fatal injuries, which meant that Pittston was second in the country, both in terms of fatal frequency and non-fatal frequency, and that is a bad safety record by any stretch of the imagination. But the company's attitude on safety was very typical. There had been some 5,000 safety violations found by federal inspectors in 1971, and a very substantial number of fines tentatively imposed against the company. Pittston fought every single one of them, even where no principal was involved, and at the time of the disaster had paid about $275 in fines total. Basically a kind of attitude that you just find throughout the whole industry of obstruction and opposition to the law just on the principle of opposing it.
The bacon was sizzling and the coffee was poured, but the dam up the holler couldn't hold any more. And the water raged down, smashed town after town. Homes dashed to pieces and whole families was drowned. How could it happen? Said, how could it be? That dam, it belonged to the coal company. An act of God, the bosses did cry. But God ain't that cruel, we can see through your lie.
The Citizens Commission to investigate the Buffalo Creek disaster was an independent organization of people in West Virginia called into being really by the West Virginia Black Lung Association to look very carefully and fully into the Buffalo Creek flood of February 1972. The most tangible, lasting result of the Citizens Commission is, of course, the report which was published. And we wrote it on the basis of what we learned out of our own investigations in the community through public hearings which we held, as well as the investigations that we did by trying to go to the record that the public agencies themselves made as they went about the course of their investigations. We were suspicious of the report that takes so long to write and has so many ifs, ands, and buts that it really said nothing. And so the Citizens Commission began to say quite early, we think that this coal company, Pittston, has murdered people. And we call upon the prosecuting attorney and the judge in Logan County, the county where that thing occurred, to prosecute and to bring to trial this coal company. And we call upon the federal government to do its part. And we charge the federal government with being negligent, and we charge the state government with being negligent. We tried to document that, and I think what we documented will stand.
The dam, as it turned out later, was in violation of at least 3 state laws and federal regulations drafted in connection with the 1969 Coal Mine Health and Safety Act. This is not to say that if the company had complied with all of these laws, it would necessarily have built a dam which was safe. None of these laws necessarily guarantee that there would have been a properly engineered dam. But the fact of the matter is that these were all laws on the books which the company felt completely free to ignore, which says something about the relationships between coal companies and state governments, and particularly about the West Virginia state government and its relations with coal companies. Just this complete freedom to ignore these laws with no fear of any kind of prosecution.
The Governor's Commission to investigate the disaster included the Director of the State Department of Natural Resources, the Director of the State Department of Mines, and the Chairman of the Public Service Commission. All agencies legally responsible for preventing disasters like Buffalo Creek. West Virginia Governor Arch Moore, commenting on press coverage, the only real sad part is that the state of West Virginia has taken a terrible beating which far overshadowed the beating which the individuals that lost their lives took, and I consider this an even greater tragedy than the flood itself.
The sad part really of the federal regulation situation is that the Bureau of Mines, when confronted with this regulation, which existed for the purpose of being enforced, tried to take the narrowest possible view of what this regulation was designed to do, and to say, in effect, well, this wasn't a situation that was designed to be covered by this regulation. Therefore, it wasn't our responsibility to go in there and do anything about it. And in the Senate hearings, you had nothing but this kind of washing of hands by supposedly responsible officials, all of whom said, well, you know, it wasn't my agency that was supposed to take care of this, it was that agency over there. And then that agency would get on and say, well, we weren't aware that it was our responsibility to do it. It must have been somebody else's. And the buck was always passed. The agencies never were willing to take any kind of responsibility for having failed to do a job. And the company never took any responsibility for having failed to comply with what they were supposed to do.
Almost 5 years before the disaster, nearly a score of state and local officials were officially warned by the Interior Department that this waste pile and 29 others in the state were unstable or could be topped by high waters. The letter from the Interior Department reported on a survey of coal refuse banks undertaken following the waste bank slide at Aberfan, Wales, that killed 116 school children in 1966. More than 2 years after the Buffalo Creek disaster, federal and state officials still rate at least 8 coal waste piles as severe hazards and about 132 as potential or minimal hazards in 7 Appalachian states. From the stockholders' report of the Pittston Company, May 1972. Pittston is heavily committed to natural resources, aware of our responsibilities to preserve the air, water, and land that we use. Throughout the company at all operating levels, we have active programs designed to protect the environment.
One of the things that the Citizens Commission found as it did its work on Buffalo Creek was that there was more to do on Buffalo Creek than merely to find out the facts of the disaster. We felt that if we were a Citizens Commission, then we could not merely be a fact-finding group, but that somehow our membership on that commission had to support the effort on that creek by people to do something about that disaster. We were trying to say to West Virginians that bodies of citizens need to bring the government to accountability. We knew that the annual stockholders meeting was coming up. We discussed this in a community meeting, and we said, how would you like to go ahead and just lay out to the officials of the company and members of the board and the stockholders the kind of tragedy that's happened to you? How would you like to do this? And people wanted to do that. Now, we then worked as the Citizens Commission to find some money to get a bus and take some 30 people, citizens of that creek, to Richmond, Virginia, to that stockholders meeting. And I think people had a strong feeling that they could do something direct and they could at least go look somebody in the face and say to him, look, mister, you killed my mother, you destroyed my house, you took away everything that I ever worked for. And look, we're hard-working coal miners and we've suffered a hellish kind of a disaster. And we ain't asking much, but we would like for you people to understand that at least you owe us compensation for our losses. And we don't want any ifs, ands, and buts about it. We would like for this company to do one little decent thing and settle claims with people whose lives have just been run over by that company-created disaster.
I agreed to meet with this delegation from Buffalo Creek. These are people that live in an area that I was born and raised in. I lived there for many years, so I understand their problems very well. They are my friends. We sat down and talked about the problems that they had, and they had one chief concern that I was not aware of. And that concern was that their claims were not being processed fast enough, that their settlements weren't being made as rapidly as they thought they should be. I assured them that the company policy was to make restitution to everyone affected that lived on Buffalo Creek. We plan to expedite the settlement of claims as rapidly as possible, and we intend to do that. They, I'm sure, felt that after our discussions that the Pittston Company and Buffalo Mining Company will do this, and we will pay the claims as rapidly as we can process it. They do understand, too, that you can't do it in an hour, that it is a large number of claims, and I think they do understand that it takes some processing, some order of going through certain procedures.
We haven't had no help on Buffalo Creek at all. The only help we've had is from the Red Cross and the Salvation Army. And we went to Richmond, Virginia to find out what that they were going to do about the losses on Buffalo Creek, to our people. They assured us that they would make all claims reasonable and fair. And people that that completely lost their homes, they asked for $15,000. And so the lawyer Staker that they have for Pittston Coal Company cuts their claim from $3,000 to $5,000 and more, and he tells them if they don't want that settlement, that for them to go get them a lawyer and fight it, and if they do that, it's going to cost them more than what they would get if he would make them if they would take what he offered them.
We don't like where we're at, although we are thankful for a trailer. But I mean, it's not like where we were accustomed to being. And we had a big 2-story house and a big yard. And now we got about a 2 or 4 trailer, and it's quite a bit of difference.
Commissioner guaranteed me, and he assured me and my committee that when we left there, to come back here and tell these people that they would be compensated and they would be fully satisfied when this thing is all over. Well, how can you satisfy people if they file a just and honest claim and then his adjusters comes along and cuts them $10,000 and $12,000 when they've lost their life's earnings? It just doesn't work that way.
I have one other question, sir. Now, there has been, at least the implication of negligence on the part of the company, but you mentioned that the people who built the dams and who inspected it actually had a part in it. Could you explain that?
Well, I think I can say briefly what I said in the shareholders meeting, and that is that the people who built the dam, who supervised the impoundment and the filtration system, are people who live in that hollow below the impoundment. And certainly if they thought that it was an unsafe situation, they first wouldn't live there. Secondly, the supervision would not build it.
You said the people on Buffalo Creek were responsible for any negligence. Doesn't the Pittston Company have some responsibility?
What did you say I said?
The people that built the dam and constructed it, engineered it, were responsible?
No, I did not say that. I'm sorry if you misinterpreted what I said.
Who do you feel is responsible?
Well, I don't think that that's a proper question at this time, because there are a number of investigations going on, and certainly our own isn't concluded, and I know the government's investigations, and it would be out of context for me to comment. Thank you very much.
Could you spell your name before you...
Well, that's the most difficult question you've asked me.
In the first days after the flood, the company tried to stick with the initial response, which a vice president named Palomara had given to a reporter from the Charleston Gazette, that it was an act of God. And the basic company attitude, which at one point I think was put almost exactly in these words, was that God simply dumped more rain into the pond behind the dam than the dam could hold, and so that was how it was an act of God. And then finally, of course, the company's attitude changed, as it had to. The company really acknowledged, although never in so many words, its liability for a non-designed dam that just was allowed to grow. And they acknowledged responsibility for it, and of course they really acknowledged it when they settled out of court for $13 million and some change from in the suit that was brought against them. But basically, the company has never really taken the attitude of feeling real guilt for this whole thing, never expressed any guilt for it, and never done anything in the way of rebuilding the community or offering, real assistance to people in other communities to indicate any kind of change of heart. There's been no change.
125 people killed, 1,100 treated for injuries, 4,000 people left homeless, 502 houses and 44 mobile homes completely destroyed, 268 houses and 42 mobile homes severely damaged and condemned. 633 other homes suffered from some damage. 1,000 cars and trucks demolished. Property damage exceeded $50 million. Dr. Albert Riccio, a psychiatrist with the County Mental Health Agency, has observed guilt feelings among those who lived while so many died, cases of extreme headaches, body aches, and hypochondria are common. A dozen elderly people in whom the symptoms constituted acute neurosis have been sent to state mental hospitals. Dr. June Church has described children who refused to bathe for months after the flood, or who screamed if floods were shown on television. One patient won't acknowledge that there was a flood. Because of the disaster and the inability of people to recreate their normal lives, psychiatrists reported a myriad of social problems in the valley. Survival syndrome is what they call it, but what it means in simple terms is alcoholism, drug abuse, nervous breakdowns, nightmares, divorce, and violence between neighbors, between husbands and wives, and between parents and children.
I don't think that there's any evidence that the company has been hurt at all financially by the disaster. First of all, the standard insurance policies picked up a large part of the liability in terms of the early claim settlements. Secondly, while $13 million sounds like an enormous settlement, if you look at what Pittston is producing now and what it's selling for, you just can't help but feel that the company has not been hurt. The company's producing more than 20 million tons of coal a year. It's selling that coal at prices now as high as 125 to 140 a ton to the Japanese steel industry. $13 million when you factor it into that kind of coal production is somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 cents to 75 cents, maybe $1 a ton. With the coal market the way it is right now, it just doesn't even appear as a blip on the Pittston financial picture. You just don't even see it there. The company just goes on making money. And the people who really wind up paying for the disaster when it all comes back, I think, are people who are buying Japanese manufactured products. It's really ironic. You get the little old lady out in California buying a Toyota made out of Japanese steel, which is made out of Pittston's coal, in her own way is making the final settlement on Buffalo Creek, but it's not coming out of Pittston's pockets. And the company is considered to be a really premium investment in the whole fuels industry now by Wall Street stock analysts. We get a lot of the reports. We see them. It's kind of sickening to read them. They never mention Buffalo Creek except in a very favorable way. They say that the company has settled and the company has not been adversely hurt, and we think Pittston continues to be an outstanding investment, that kind of thing. And that's how much Pittston's been hurt.
How could it happen, said how could it be? That dam, it belonged to the coal company. And act of God, the bosses did cry. But God ain't that cruel, we can see through your lie. Who ordered the dozer to build that dam? And who's living high off the work of our hands? Who takes our coal but don't share in the fear? Yes, whose greed for money has cost us so dear? Yes, whose greed for money has cost us so dear?
There were various estimates of what it would have cost to build a dam properly, ranging from about $50,000 to about $200,000. Whichever figure you choose, it's obviously not very much. And the question that comes up about why Pittston didn't do it probably is a very large question in terms of why the coal industry has never done anything more than it has absolutely had to do in the area that it works in. You know, why do people strip mountains in Appalachia and not put it back, aside from the fact that you can't put it back from gravity? But I mean, why don't they even make the effort? Why do people not make the effort to clean up their mines until you have a Farmington disaster that causes such a storm of outrage that you get a federal law passed finally and they have to do something? Why don't they do it? Well, they don't do it because this industry has a long tradition of getting by on the cheap. You just keep on producing coal until something goes wrong, and you hope you're going to get by. And you sit up there in New York, and you look at the figures, and you forget all about the people living down there. Kamisha probably never knew that dam existed, probably never had any idea that it existed, and if told about it, probably would have put it in his basket, you know, to be dealt with at some point. And, you know, but it wasn't relevant. It just wasn't relevant.
I didn't see God driving them slate trucks up there and wearing a hard hull cap. I did not see that at no time when I visited the dam. That's the way I feel about it. I don't believe it was an act of God. It was an act of man.